The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Time for the Bronx Buzz. We are here once again with Bronx journalists, Bronx writers, Bronx photographers sometimes, not today. But the idea is really to give you a chance to see what people are writing about, see what they're thinking about when they do the writing, and also give you a chance to meet some of the people whose names have the bylines on the stories that you've been reading. And this evening we are thrilled because we have two great writers. One is here with us now, and the other is going to join us on Skype in just a few moments. Jeanmarie Evelly, nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Jeanmarie, people may know her from the Norwood News, they may know her from the Bronx, they may know her from DNA Info, but now you are with, drumroll please.
City Limits.
You're with City Limits. Tell me a little bit about, just so people will get to meet you, it's your first time on the show, just about your background and how you got into journalism, why you got into journalism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So I went to college and majored in English, minored in journalism.
Inquiring minds want to know what college.
Oh, SUNY New Paltz.
She went to New
State
Paltz.
school, yes.
Okay.
SUNY New Paltz, great time, great town.
We don't want to know what kind of time you had. Okay.
Great time learning.
Okay.
So I've always loved to write. I ended up minoring in journalism there and sort of fell in love with it. And then when I graduated, I came back downstate. I grew up on Long Island, so went to then graduate school at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, and after that, been reporting ever since.
Why? Why was journalism your calling?
Well, I wanted to find a way where I could write for a living and actually make a living doing it. And I've always
I was going to say good luck with that. We were just
Exactly.
talking before the show about the difficulties journalists and local journalists are having right now, but we push on. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So journalism seemed like a kind of viable way to do that, and I love talking to people, I love meeting new people and telling their stories, so it was kind of a good fit.
Before we get into specifically what you're covering now, let's just do one more personal thing. What kinds of things motivate you? What turns you on when you say, this is a good story, this is fun to do, or this is really why I got to do this? What kinds of stories?
I like whatever people are talking about and whatever matters in people's kind of day-to-day lives. So at City Limits, we focus a lot on kind of city policies that really impact people, and that sort of day in, day out, what the city's doing and how is it either benefiting residents or maybe not benefiting residents the way that it should. And those are the types of stories
really
I like to think.
Stuff that has impact,
Yeah,
stuff
exactly.
that's buzzing, you know, they used to call them water cooler stories. And all that
Exactly,
kind of
sort
stuff.
of what makes the city go round.
If you go to, and you probably have done it plenty of times, if you go to the City Limits website and then you look at staff, and we go down to you, and they don't list all the reporters, but you are listed there because you are the youth program manager. It seems like an unusual a title for an unusual job for somebody in media. What is the City Limits youth program, and as a manager, what do you do?
Yeah, so we have a internship training program for high school and college students who are interested in journalism and want to learn sort of the basics about reporting. So they come to City Limits and they either do during the school year a 10-week internship or in the summer a 4-week internship. And it teaches them the basics of investigative reporting techniques through sort of a civic engagement lens. And they work on their own stories with the ultimate goal of publishing something on the City Limits site and earning their own byline. So it's great.
It's a good thing.
How
many students are involved? I'd love to hear that there are some Bronx students involved.
Oh, we had a lot of Bronx students.
Oh,
My
that's
spring,
what
yeah.
I wanted.
The program originally actually initiated serving mostly only Bronx students,
That's
from what I
we wanna
recall. We
hear.
now accept applicants from all 5 boroughs, so
Right.
if you're a teen who's interested in journalism, you should look us up. It's called the Clarify program.
The Clarify
Yes, it
program.
stands for City Limits Accountability Reporting Initiative for Youth.
Wow. And
a long
you
one.
only know that because you're the manager of it. About how
Exactly.
many young people do you get involved with?
In the summer, we just actually finished up our summer internship where we had 8 student interns who were reporting with us for 4 weeks. During the school year, we do about 15 per semester, so 15 in the fall, 15 in the spring, so about 45 throughout the year.
Must be incredibly exciting. And you know,
It's
I asked
great,
what you
yeah.
like to do when you write, but you must really enjoy doing that, watching young people, helping them learn what you know and all those kinds of things.
Absolutely. You definitely, when you're articulating what you love about an art or craft to students to teach it to them, I think it sort of reinforces how much you like it. So that's been a great,
Says a lot
great
about
experience.
it says a lot about the people at City Limits. Jared, of course, has been on our show many times, and the way they view the world, and that if we're all gonna do well, if journalism is gonna succeed, we've got to build it up. All right, let's talk about some of the issues. The most recent one is this cap on for-hire vehicles. Let's talk about that, and it's really a controversial thing because here are people trying to make a living. I talked to some Bronxites recently who said, I love Uber because it's cheaper. I call them, they come right to the door, but it's crowding our streets, and we're overflowing in the Bronx and certainly in Manhattan with cars. What's your point? What happened, and what do you think the implications will be?
Yeah, so yesterday was a big day. The City Council voted to approve a package of bills that will regulate the for-hire vehicle industry. So those are cars like Uber and Lyft, those types of services. And basically what it's doing, the big bill that came out of it was for 1 year, there's going to be a cap they're going to basically press pause on issuing new licenses for these for-hire vehicles. So it'll kind of stay at the current amount. There are some exceptions. There's exceptions for if somebody applies for a license for a wheelchair accessible vehicle, because they're trying to increase the amount of accessible taxis that are on the road. And there are some other exceptions, but generally it's going to kind of halt the issuance of new licenses for these cars. And during that time, the city's Taxi and Limousine Commission is going to study the impact that the industry is having on city residents and on the streets, and sort of take a look at the industry because it's grown really, really fast.
Yeah. You know what's a fascinating aspect of it that didn't come up when I was introducing what the concept is. You've got these yellow cab drivers who have paid a lot of money for their medallions, and so number one, they're being undercut by this new industry, and number two, what did I pay all that money for? So I had the right to be in the street, and now I'm next to a guy who, number one, is tying up the traffic, and number two, taking some of my business away.
Yeah, I mean, the rise of these kind of app-based ride-hailing services has been really mediocre, I guess. I mean, no, sorry, I'm mixing up my words there. But it's just, they've grown so fast, and they've really revolutionized the way that the yellow cab industry is operating too, because now they have all this increased competition, like you said, from drivers who didn't have to bid a lot of money for a taxi medallion, which is usually something that drivers save up years for. It's greatly devalued the medallions that they've saved up and bought, and so it's sort of cutting into, one of the guys that I spoke to yesterday, who was a longtime yellow cab driver, said the pie just keeps getting smaller. So the share that all the drivers have just keeps getting smaller and smaller because there's just more of these cars out on the streets, and everybody trying to make a living.
You know, I'm going to throw another monkey wrench in there is, we have the green cabs that are in the outer boroughs, and of course we still have the regular livery cabs. Everybody fighting for the same market. Something's got to play. Interesting way of handling it by the city, I thought, to do, in essence, a moratorium on new ones. Everybody stop before we keep growing. I thought that's an interesting kind of management tool.
Yeah,
we don't usually get that in the city, actually.
Yeah, the idea being they're going to take this kind of time to look at the industry sort of holistically and I guess decide what they want to do after that.
Another a new item that's come up over the past week, and you actually wrote about it from a different point of view, is the notion of 4 new Metro North stations in the borough of the Bronx. They're going to be at Morris Park, Parkchester, Van Nest, Co-op City, and Hunts Point. They're going to stomp all the way down. They're going to have workshops and have people weigh in on what the locations are, what the impacts are, what kinds of things they need to do. But you had an interesting take on the price of commuter rail service for people of the Bronx. Why don't you review that, and then we can even discuss whether this will impact some of that.
Sure. So we did a story this spring basically looking at the price of the commuter rails for people specifically in the city. So obviously we have Metro North, we have the Long Island Railroad that runs through parts of Queens. You guys in the Bronx have the Metro North. And it's pretty expensive. If you've tried to hop on a Metro North and just go a couple stops, maybe just into Grand Central from up here, it charges you a lot compared to Subway, the Subway 275 fare.
Right.
And it charges more per mile the shorter distance once you're in the kind of
Oh,
zone
really?
of the city. Yeah, that was one of the things we looked at.
I don't take it often enough to know. That's fascinating.
Yeah, the idea being these rails were really kind of designed to serve people coming from further away.
From Brewster.
Exactly. And people living within the limits of the city, within the 5 boroughs, end up paying more per mile. A smaller amount overall, but more per mile than people coming from further out.
What a fascinating story and a fascinating dialogue, because Metro North has been suggested, let's say, for riders at Yankee Stadium, going to and from the ball games. I don't even want to run through it. It will be very interesting to see how the rates get impacted if we say, okay, now we're going to say to commuters in Co-op City who have been dying to get some mass transit in their community, which has been so isolated. If we say to them, okay, take this instead of the bus or the subway, but you're going to pay more than somebody who's riding it from Westchester or Connecticut, boy, I could tell you firsthand that's not going to fly.
Exactly. I did. So one of the things the MTA is trying to get more city residents to use the commuter rails. They recently introduced something called the Atlantic ticket. It rolled out at the end of the spring. It's basically like a half fare for people who are traveling from 4 Long Island Railroad stations in Southeast Queens. These are areas that don't really have kind of subways in the immediate area, so a lot of people rely on the Long Island Railroad lines, but the cost of that ticket was a little too expensive for it to be part of people's daily commutes. So what they're doing is reducing the fare for those 4 stations to see if more city residents end up using it.
All right, let's just take a quick vote. I vote yes.
Yeah,
advocates
have actually pointed out that the future Metro North stations in the Bronx should get that similar kind of
Speaking of
treatment.
advocates, we really only have about a minute, and this is about a 2-hour topic, but if you need assistance and you want to ride the subways, it's a mess because there are very few stations with elevators so that you can go up and down. I think about it all the time when I get out of a train in Manhattan, I don't know, 23rd Street or something, 26th Street, and I've got to walk up the stairs. Thank God that I'm able to do so, but there are so many people who would have to travel somewhere else and then figure it out. Is there any way the city can possibly, with all the stations, outfit their subways to comply with ADA rules?
Well, they're going to try, and they're certainly trying.
You are so nice.
Currently, the subway system, only about a quarter of stations are accessible for people who use wheelchairs and other mobility devices. So it's certainly a problem now. The MTA has announced that they're really kind of doubling down on efforts to increase accessibility. Andy Byford, who's the new New York City Transit president, says he wants to add, I think, something like 50 stations, new stations with elevators over the next 5 years. So we'll see.
Well, of course, you know the story with the MTA, with everything. Somebody's going to have to pay for that, and we'll find out how it goes. Listen, Jeanmarie, now that you've made your first appearance, we hope it's going to be the first of many.
I would love to come back.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so do some more writing. Thank you for getting your start in the Bronx at the Norwood News, and we'll see you around town. That's Jeanmarie Evelly from City Limits. A pleasure to have you on the show. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to go to amNew York, and also a former reporter for a Bronx newspaper who has moved on to a city position, and she's going to come back and talk about what she's writing about. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family?
This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry.
Go along, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Hey, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. That was a really enjoyable segment, and we have another one coming up for you right now. It is time to go via Skype to a newspaper called amNew York. My old friend Sarina Trangle. Nice to have you with us, Sarina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sarina's joining us via Skype. Now let's just rewind the clock a little bit, and let's go back to way back. You were at the Riverdale Press, right?
I was, yes.
Do you even remember those days? I mean, do we count how long ago it was? Give us just a little bit. And you were on this show back then, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever came on the show back then. This is maybe 5 years ago, but I did.
Oh, okay. Then you weren't. Yeah.
At another publication.
Tell me, just remind me a little bit about your background. How did you get into journalism and why?
I've just always been very interested in current events. I like to gossip. I like to talk to people. I like to listen to people. So it's something I've always been interested in.
When you get an assignment for a story, what kinds of stories do you say to yourself, "Oh, I love this kind of story"? Like, what really motivates you? What turns on your journalistic juices and say, "This one is something I really want to do"? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think it kind of goes in phases, to be honest. But if it's something I, would be interested in learning about or hearing about myself, or could imagine people that I talk to regularly being interested in learning about, I usually pursue it. Often if I'm doing a lot of, formal legal documents or something, then I really get the urge to talk to a lot of people. So just, I like to switch it up, do a little bit of everything.
People have asked me over the number of years that I've been doing this, how do you know you've had a good show? Or what do when you do a good show, what is it? And I always say, if I learned something, if I felt like I was changed because of the show, or I got information I hadn't had, then that's how I know a good show. And it sounds very much like what you're saying, is that, wow, if there's a curiosity in there, if there's something I can uncover and learn myself and help people learn, then that's what I'm really after. So it sounds like we're on the same page when it comes to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I'm not learning anything, then there's a problem. I'm probably not putting new information out there or advancing the conversation.
I do remember that you were on the show, and now I remember why, because you at somewhere along the way you worked for City and State, and
right.
Then you had done a study about Bronx Democrats, and that's when you were on the show. I think that we had done a thing about that. Anyway, I'm remembering what was going on. Anyway, let's get into amNew York. So amNew York is, I guess, part of the Newsday family.
Yeah, we're owned by Newsday, which is a Long Island newspaper, but we cover strictly New York City. We, collaborate with them, work with them, but we, have our own publication. It comes out Monday through Friday. It's distributed near several subway stations, bus stops.
Yeah, people pick. I've picked it up any number of times. I certainly follow it and follow you online. One of a story you did, and you did just an exhaustive study of it, and I loved it so much because going back to the thing, I learned something. Was this a piece you did on the Andrew Freedman Home? Now, a number of years ago, I drove by it, and I said, "Gee," and I've lived in the Bronx all my life. I never remembered seeing that building. It's almost like hidden away. And then ultimately, I had a chance to go in it. It's this big, expansive property, and nobody seemed to know what was in there. And now, as time goes on, it's being kind of unfurled. Talk to me a little bit about what's there, and then the fact that, of course, they're getting a $1.7 million upgrade.
So right now it is owned by the Mid-Bronx Senior Citizens Council and used for, sort of a variety of youth programs. I think they have after-school, summer, Saturday programming for children, and then they also just do a variety of different community events. And then they have some gallery space. They have used some of the former bedrooms or living quarters as artist studios. So they have residencies for artists where they can have a workspace that they can use for free, provided that they agree to work with Mid-Bronx, in a variety of capacities, teaching workshops, putting on shows, going and working with seniors that might be involved with other Mid-Bronx properties or sites or programs. So it's, for people who may not be familiar with the history of it, it's a very large mansion. It was built in 1924 and then later expanded. It was, paid for through the will of a real estate mogul named Andrew Freedman, who, there's sort of some discrepancies in the historical record about exactly what his motivation was, but his sister told reporters that watching his parents lose their money made him believe that people who were once very wealthy and lost all their money had a harder time adapting to poverty, and so they should get special, protection, and he set aside money for a home to shelter formerly wealthy people who lost their money in old age. And so this mansion was used to house these, I guess, bankrupt billionaires, etc., for decades. And over time, the endowment ran out, and the Bronx bought it, used it for an adult home, and then I think upkeep of the building and sort of the reimbursement rate from the state for taking care of adults wasn't financially feasible. So it eventually has been sort of transitioned into a cultural and art hub, also used for a lot of youth programs and other community events.
I went in there the first time I was there, and it's got to be 4 years ago. We did the 20th anniversary of my TV program, Bronx Talk, the other program that I host. And the first thing I thought of when I went in there, I said, this is just an unbelievable space, and it could be used for just, I mean, you could list a million things, 1.7 million things, as a matter of fact. Talk to me about what you think the future holds and what that money might be used for at the Andrew Freedman Home.
So, I spoke with Walter Perrier, who is the executive director for the Andrew Freedman Home Initiative in Bronx, and he said they're sort of in the process of writing up bids and all that. So I don't know that they know pricing for all of it, but the things that they're planning to use it for is trying to make the mansion a little bit more, I guess, just visibly present and known to people. Kind of sprucing up the outside with signs and a mural on the southern end. Just to make it more inviting, make sure people are aware of it if they're walking by on the Grand Concourse. Also improving the gardens and possibly, teaching people how to can produce, using the produce for a farm-to-table operation. And then in the ground floor, there's a ballroom that they want to redo the floor so it can be used for, performances, whether that's dancing or theater or, any kind of physical performative art or activity, and putting in a speaker system for any kind of shows that might need sound, improving the lights, putting in a central AC system, and then upstairs they're renovating, I think, about 200,000 square feet of space that has been sort of not used, largely unused, closed off for decades, so that it can be used for also performance art. I think they're going to have some entrepreneurship programming and help in that space, and using some of it for workforce development to train people on art handling, which I think is requires similar skills to a lot of sort of construction and other training programs that are already offered, but the starting pay is considerably higher according to most reports.
It has been talked about as a career for Bronxites through the Bronx Museum, which is right across the street, of course. Right. I'll tell you, all the things that you listed there, you know, I'm like, check. We need all that in the Bronx. I want to, just before we run out of time, I just want to talk about the Hunts Point Highway redesign. You just did a story about that a couple of weeks ago. You know, I had Marcos Crespo on Bronx Talk, and he was enthusiastic about it, but there's many advocates who are saying, you know what, it's not all that we were hoping it was going to be. Talk to me about some of the things you learned about what concerns are out there about this Bruckner and Sheridan redesign.
So I think at this point, the main concern, or I guess sought change that people have, is they don't want entrance ways onto the Sheridan on Edgewater Road, which is where the state is currently proposing to build for ramps or points of entrance to the highway system. The various community groups don't like this idea because they believe it will sort of incentivize trucks coming to and from the Hunts Point markets to use Edgewater Road, and that will, you know, route diesel trucks near a bunch of parks and the Bronx River, which people have spent, you know, decades working to clean up and working to, you know, formalize and get these parks open there. I know Concrete Plant Park formally opened in 2009. And if this plan were to move forward, it is at this point talking about using a section of Concrete Plant Park.
Yeah, that's not going to sit well. I've got to interrupt you because we're almost out of time, and I do want to ask you one very important question about that. And is it already done? Are the plans set, or do you think there's time for revision? We only have about 30 seconds, so we got to do it quick.
I don't know exactly how revision would work, but it's not formally approved. I mean, the Federal Highway Agency would need to approve it, and also if they are going to use parkland, the city and state legislature
we'll have to vote on that.
Alienation legislation.
Right. Sarina Trangle, I hope you will return to our program once again pretty soon.
Great, I would love to. Thanks for having me.
There she is, Sarina Trangle from amNew York. Make sure you pick up the paper. Make sure you check it out online. And when you do, you'd say, oh, wow, I saw Sarina on the Bronx Buzz. Take care, Sarina. Be well. Bye. All right, there you go. That is our program for this evening, the Bronx Buzz. Thank you to Sarina. Thank you to Jeanmarie. And we will remind you that this Monday night on Bronx Talk, a very special debate between Senator Jeff Klein and Alessandra Biaggi. Good night.